Hi. Look at you, a room full of healthcare professionals. I love it. Would it surprise any of you if you learned that my number one lesson that I learned in my 31 years of being a nurse is suck it up? That suck it up mentality is ingrained in us in nursing school and in medical school, and by the time we reach our first jobs, it's absolutely solidified. We put all of ourselves into our patient care, often at the detriment of our own health and well-being. We forego breaks and lunches. We work weekends and holidays and extra. We're also always the strong ones for our patients. We're hailed as heroes, and that's a challenging job, isn't it? In addition to being in a challenging field, we also all have external stressors in our lives. We've got kids in sports. We've got overdue bills. My washer just broke last week. Add an illness or a catastrophic event or a death in the family to that mix, and it becomes untenable. And that's what happened to me. In 2019, in June, my father passed away. And then 6 months later, right before Christmas, my best friend of 25 years also passed away. I was miserable in my job. We were short-staffed. Nurses were leaving left and right. I was going through menopause. And then COVID hit, right? And I, as a single mom, I didn't have any childcare. I was so overwhelmed. I was just caught up in this vortex of grief and angst and worry and hot flashes. And I was like, what do I do? I was so overwhelmed. I was burnt out. I was one of these statistics that the US Surgeon General mentioned in August of last year. And he said that burnout is a healthcare crisis. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. Healthcare workers, in my opinion, are the heart of healthcare. When healthcare workers are thriving and supported, I believe that health equity is advanced. Patients have greater satisfaction. They improve their outcomes. Costs are reduced. But when healthcare workers are not thriving, if they're in this crisis situation, we're still expected to deliver excellent patient care. How do we do that? For me, in 2019, I fell back onto a 10-year meditation practice, and I developed what I call heart-centered care. It's just simply where you derive peace from within your own heart. When you're practicing heart-centered care, you just focus your awareness and your attention on your heart center, the literal center of your chest, the core of yourself. And because I practiced heart-centered care and gave myself some compassion when I needed it, I did not stay in that horrible, burned out space I was in. I was able to pretty quickly come out of it, and it wasn't that difficult. I just incorporated a few mindfulness techniques into my life. Mindfulness is simply stilling your mind and being aware of the present moment. Meditation is a great way to practice mindfulness. It's a favorite of mine. I credit meditation for saving my life in 2019. And when I incorporated meditation and mindfulness techniques into my work, I became a better nurse. Let me give you an example of how I do that. We were in our busy gynecology clinic, and all of our patients showed up that morning for their appointments, so we were hopping. And one of the providers questioned a process that I do with all of my patient care. And so I justified why I do what I do. And we kind of went back and forth. It wasn't a confrontation. But, I felt that I was right. And I didn't want to change my practice. So we kind of reached an impasse and we went back to patient care. But I took that incident with me. I felt very tense and I was frustrated and I kind of felt reprimanded. And so I said to my nurse colleague, I'm going to go take a few minutes to meditate. And that's what I did. I went to an empty, quiet room, pulled up my meditation app, set a timer for 3 minutes, and I focused on my heart center, and I breathed. Sure enough, of course, all those pesky thoughts kept interrupting me, mostly about the incident that had just happened, and I just acknowledged those thoughts. And then I put them in a little balloon, and I sent them gently on their way, and I went back to my breath. And I did that over and over and over again. It took me 2 solid minutes to create peace and calmness. And then I stayed there for another minute and meditated just so I could live in that peace before I went back to my clinic. Instead of just compartmentalizing that incident and putting it up on a shelf like we so often do, right? We need to get through our shift, right? So we'll just put this on a shelf and we'll deal with it later. Except we don't deal with it later, do we? We just keep putting things on the shelf. We keep putting our emotions on the shelf. All those events that happen, we just shelve them so we can carry on with our work. Until eventually that shelf is so full that it comes crashing down and all those emotions come out. Find yourself lashing at your spouse or your kids or entering depression. I went back to the clinic that day after 3 minutes of meditation, and I was a better nurse. My patients were better off for me having taken the time. I was able to be present with them in the moment. I let go of all the emotions of that incident before. Maybe meditation isn't your thing. There's a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness, and mindful eating is one of them. Just a non-judgmental, don't care if you have Funyuns, awareness of the sensations of eating. Okay, so the next time you have a lunch break, and you will have a lunch break, I invite you to just pay attention to the food that you're eating, right? I always have leftovers. And so, for example, if I have rigatoni, I can enjoy the texture of that rigatoni as I chew. I can taste the oregano in the sauce that I put in there, that little bite of Asiago cheese that I love. And then I take a drink of my water, and I can feel the coolness of that water going down my throat. And I can just imagine that water coursing through all 37 trillion cells in my body and hydrating it. It is impossible to mindfully eat and not be grateful for the nourishment that the food is giving you. And speaking of gratitude, gratitude is another wonderful mindfulness technique. And it's really simple to implement. In fact, I did it the other day at a stoplight. I was getting my 7-year-old ready for school, and it was a super busy day. And there was breakfast, and did we brush our teeth, and why do we have mismatched socks? Pick your battles, Mom, keep going. Do you have shoes? Let's go. We get in the car, we finally get to school, and then I'm in the drop-off line. And if you know, you know. That is not an express lane. So there I was in this abyss, super frustrated. I had so many things to do. I had a lot of errands. I had a lot of things to accomplish that day. It was my only day off. I wanted to get the show on the road. So finally, it's our turn. So I pull up, basically tuck and roll my daughter out of the car, and I move on my way. And I'm at the stoplight. And mind you, we just live across the street from the school. So it was like a 2-minute commute. Don't judge me. It was raining, okay? So I was sitting there at the stoplight, and I could just hear all the chaos in my mind. And I felt the tension in my body, and I just decided to break the cycle right then and there. And I intentionally began practicing gratitude. I became grateful that my 7-year-old is healthy enough to go to school, and that I'm healthy enough to take her. I was grateful for my car that gets me to and from places I want to go. I'm grateful for my mom with dementia who lives with me, and I get to take care of her. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had tears in my eyes because I was overcome with gratitude for my life. I walked in the door, and my mom stood up to greet me. I gave her the biggest hug, and we just held on tight, and I'm telling you, the gratitude and the love in that room was palpable. It was such a beautiful moment, and I would not have had that moment had I not practiced gratitude on the way home. Gratitude really does make us realize that what we have is enough. Now, that's not to say that the onus is completely on healthcare workers. Burnout is a workplace system issue. So healthcare administration and leadership can step up and find ways to prioritize the health and well-being of their healthcare workers. A couple of things that other organizations are doing successfully include dedicating meditation rooms throughout the buildings so that employees can go in peace and find peace. They're offering mindfulness classes and techniques that employees can go to while they work during their work hours, where they can gain some knowledge. Because the more you practice mindfulness, the more of a habit it becomes. So the next time you're feeling like you just need to suck it up and keep going and going and going for your patients, I encourage you, take a minute. Tap into your heart center. Give yourself some compassion. Because you know that compassion for others actually comes from compassion for yourselves. And if you're not giving yourself compassion, who will? So, be compassionate to yourself, and then let your compassion flood the world. Thank you.